Leanne. Welcome to the second session of Greek and Roman mythology, gods, goddesses, heroes, and mortals. First, I'd like to thank Phyllis Saarinen for so ably facilitating last week's session when I wasn't able to be here. It's always a pleasure to introduce my classics colleague, Marianne Eaverly. We have already learned that she is a classical archaeologist who has excavated in Spain, Israel, Cyprus, and Greece, and that she is a winner of several teaching awards at UF. Perhaps less well known are some of her other accomplishments that range beyond the ancient world. She is, for example, a member of the Impact of Materials on Society in collaboration with faculty in the College of Engineering that led to a presentation at the Materials Research Society. I think it had something to do with Roman concrete, right? Then there is her work on the study of mythological and archaeological imagery in the work of modernist women poets, which has led to a number of presentations and publications in collaboration with Professor Marcia Bryant of the English department, and also an exhibition at the Harn Museum on the classical conversion, tradition, and innovation. So here is Marianne Eaverly for the second session, the nature and origin of the universe and the creation of mortals.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sheila. Good to be here again. So here's our second. And let's see. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about creation. And of course, every group of people who ever lived anywhere has probably thought, I don't think this is an assumption on my part, has probably thought, where did all this come from? Where did we come from? So this is the Greek answer to that question. And it has two parts. One part is the origin of the world, which we call cosmogony. And the other is the origin of the gods, which is theogony. So it's really a two-part. And it's really complicated, I'll just tell you, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, but that's okay, right? Okay, so our main source for this is the Greek writer Hesiod, who writes in the 8th century BC, and he writes a poem about this called the Theogony. And so he asks the muses, the spirits of poetic inspiration, to tell him how it all happened, which of the gods were first. And he wants to know, how did Zeus come to rule the world? Because in his world, Zeus is in charge of everything. So how did that happen? Right. So here it is. For the Greeks, in the beginning, there was chaos. Now, to us, chaos is, maybe some of the things that are going on in Washington right now, but chaos to the ancient Greeks was a gaping hole. So first there was just this chasm, this big gaping hole. And then, and we don't have exactly how the then happened, but then there was Gaia, who's earth, Tartarus, who is the deepest, darkest place ever, and Eros, sexual love. Okay, so yeah, that's all. Then chaos also had some children, darkness, night. Night is also the mother of the fates. I don't know if you know what the Greeks believed about the fates, but they thought that when you were born, there was a thread, and one of the fates had spun the thread. One of the other fates measured how long your thread was going to be, and the scariest of the fates cut your thread. Okay, so these came out of night. Nemesis, retribution, she's the goddess of, as we would say, what goes around comes around. Okay. And then Erebus and Nyx produce ether, which is radiance, and Hemera, which is day. So we get darkness and light going on. And then Gaia produces Uranus, the sky, and the mountains, which are the mountains, and Pontus, the sea. So now we've got sky, mountains, and sea. Gaia and Uranus produce the Titans. The Titans are beautiful, human formed spirits, but they also produce the Cyclops, and some other very strange beings, the Hecatoncheires. Okay? So the Titans are untamed forces of nature, but they're human formed. Remember, for the Greeks, all these kinds of spirits have to have human form. And there are 6 male and 6 female. Works out perfectly. So, of course, they get together, and you're looking at this long list and thinking, oh no. But of course, we don't have a test in this class. But anyway, even if we were having a test, I wouldn't make you learn all of the Titans. The 2 important ones for our purposes are Oceanus 1 plus 11 Tethys, and then 7 uh, Rhea and 12 Cronus. Those are the biggies. The others get together, boy, girl, boy, girl. Now, Hyperion has important children, and his children are the moon and the dawn and also the sun. And these are very, very important. Show you here the east pediment of the Parthenon, the temple to Athena in Athens. And I don't know if you've seen it. It's, of course, not in Athens. It's in the British Museum in London. But the scene is the story of the birth of the goddess Athena. And why I show it to you here is because the scene is set in the sculpture by, you can see horses in one corner and horses in the other corner. This is the Greek concept of the sun and the moon. So Athena's birth takes place at this magical moment when the chariot of the sun is coming up and the chariot of the moon is going down. And the moon is a female and the sun is male. So Helios and Selene, the moon. So I show you that. There's one story I'll tell you about Helios. There are lots of stories associated with all of these figures, but I'll tell you the one about Helios. Helios has a son named Phaethon, and Phaethon asks his dad for a favor. And his father says, of course, son, anything you want. And he says, Dad, can I drive the chariot? The chariot that you pull the sun across the sky in. And Helios has promised, and if the gods swear a certain kind of promise, they have to keep it. So he has to keep it. So he gives the kid the reins to the chariot, and he starts driving them. And I don't know if people have done things with horses, but horses have a certain memory of some routes that they've taken. So in the beginning, the horses are like, okay, we're pulling the sun across the sky. That's what we do. But then they begin to realize that there's something wrong about who's controlling them. It doesn't feel right. And they start going all over the place. And the sun is dipping down in the sky. And so this is the Greek explanation for why those of us who have darker pigmentation have darker pigmentation. The sun got close to us as it was swirling around through the sky. Well, Zeus finally says, we can't have this, and he kills Phaethon. Yeah, I know. Not a happy story. No, sorry. And then the Cyclops, monsters. The Titans are beautiful. And I just have to say this. Remember the Titans, because I know, we'll get back to, I shouldn't have said it, we'll get back to them. The Cyclops are also children of Gaia and Uranus, and Cyclopses are one-eyed giants. You see an image of one here, actually a Roman image. You may be familiar with the Cyclops Polyphemus that Odysseus blinds. That's a Cyclops, but that's not these. These are different ones, okay? And these are blacksmiths for the gods. These are the ones who make the thunderbolts, and the thunderbolt is Zeus's weapon, and they have to be made. So they have names: Thunderer, Flasher, Brightener. And then we have the Hecatoncheires. They have 100 hands and 50 heads. And I can't show you a picture of them because the Greeks couldn't portray them. The Romans don't have images of them. I even looked in some of the computer games that kids play, and they had them, but they couldn't get the 50 heads and all the hands. So you just have to imagine what they look like. Now back to the Titans. The most important are Cronus and Rhea because they are going to be the parents or the grandparents of all of the Olympians, the ones that we talked about last time. Now, There's a slight problem in that Uranus doesn't like that Gia is having these children. And so she gives birth and he stuffs them right back into her. And I know from people who are in late stages of pregnancy that all they want is to get that baby out, and they certainly don't want it going back in. But this is what he's doing. So these they cannot be born, the Titans, and the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclopes he puts in Tartarus, the deep. Remember the deep dark place from the beginning. So this union is producing children, but they're not being allowed to thrive. So Gia comes up with a plan, and she says to Cronus, your father will come at night to lie with me, and I want you to do something. Here is a sickle, and I want you to do something with this sickle. Yes. Yeah. So he comes to lie with her, and you think of this image. There is the sky, he's the sky, and she's the earth, and he comes to lie with her, but something disrupts everything, and he's castrated, and the severed genitals are thrown away. The blood turns into the Furies. The Furies are these terrifying female divinities who pursue people who've committed murder, and they will pursue you to the ends of the earth. Has anyone ever seen the movie Ghost? There's a part where the guy just gets sucked. That's kind of what the Furies are like. He gets sucked into they just pursue you. And giants. And we think of giants as great big people, and they are. But in the Greek world, they're also connected to the earth. They have legs like snakes. Okay? But this castration has some serious effects for Uranus, but it also means that now earth and sky are separate, right? They kind of spring apart after this action. Yeah. Something else is born. The genitals are thrown into the ocean, and the combination of genitals and sea foam produces Aphrodite. So here we see her springing from the foam, as it were. This is a Greek version of this. This is my favorite. This is the Roman version of Roman wall painting. She's like kicking back, right? Yes, I've just been born. And our artist here is maybe somewhat less talented if you try to figure out which way her legs are going. Yeah. But anyway, there's an alternate version where she's not born from the sea, but this is the more common version, that she comes from these genitals and the sea foam. Now, Gia also has relations with Pontus, the sea, and that produces monsters and sea deities. And in particular, lots of creatures that are combinations of parts, not animals that you would find in nature, or animals that look natural but have special powers. When we talk about Hercules, he has to kill the Nemean lion. It's a lion that looks like a lion, but it's invulnerable. You cannot pierce it. So these special things. And then sea deities, Nereus produces the Nereids. Sea deities, there are 6,000 sea deities from Titans. There are thousands from Nereus. Because if you think about the sea, and the Greeks were very much a seafaring, sea-traveling people, the sea is mysterious and vast and deep enough to accommodate all of these thousands of creatures that live there, human-formed creatures for the most part. But what about these monsters? The Greek word monster actually means something that you point at in surprise. And they had come in contact, especially in the 8th century BC, with the older civilizations in Egypt and the Near East that have all kinds of composite creatures, right? You see the Sphinx in Egypt, you're used to that. You don't think of it as a composite creature, but it's a human and a lion put together. I don't know what this thing in brick from Babylon is, the thing in the lower thing with the snake tail and it's got chicken legs and we don't know what that is, but that's something they would have seen. And also this creature from Assyria that's part animal. They would have seen these things, but they wouldn't have necessarily known what the people who created them thought they were. For example, in Egypt, the Sphinx is not a monster. The Sphinx is a symbol that Pharaoh is as strong as a lion, right? But they didn't interpret these things that way, and so they came up with their own monsters. The Gorgon, who was Medusa, Cerberus, the three-headed dog, the Chimera, who for some reason has a lion's body with a goat head sticking out of it and a snake tail. But you can see those Eastern things would have heavily influenced them. And then the Sphinx, which is not the head of the ruler on a lion, but a monstrous winged creature that is female. And we'll get to that later about the monstrousness of women. Okay, so we said Cronus and Rhea. So they're the parents of Hestia, Demeter, Poseidon, Hera, Hades, and Zeus. So now Uranus is out of the picture. Cronus and Rhea have produced these children who are Olympians, and you see the familiar names. But Cronus hasn't learned anything from Uranus, and so he swallows the children. Just doesn't want kids. Wants the fun of making kids, but doesn't really want to be bothered with kids. So he swallows these kids. So Rhea doesn't like this, and Gia tells her, "This is what you need to do. You need to hide one of them." So when Zeus is born, before he's born, she gives Cronus a stone wrapped in baby clothes and says, "Look, I have the baby." And then she goes off to Crete and actually has the baby. So Zeus is actually born. All of his brothers and sisters have been swallowed. He has been swallowed as a rock, but Cronus doesn't notice this. You swallow enough babies, the rock doesn't not going to make any difference, right? So Zeus is raised by nymphs. Nymphs are spirits of nature, again, human formed. They're spirits everywhere. So I can't tell you about the creation of every single spirit that there is, but these are mostly nymphs are mostly females. They live in springs, they live in trees. Okay. They give Cronus something so that he starts vomiting out the stone and the children. And the stone was considered to be sacred. It was set up at Delphi, the shrine that's sacred to the god Apollo, and it was called the Omphalos and was called the navel of the world. That stone marked the very center of the Greek world as far as they were concerned. Zeus had sent eagles out from distant points, and that's where they met. That's the center of the world. It doesn't look like a stone to us, but this is how they portrayed it. You see a coin, and Apollo is sitting on it. It looks like a basket, but this was supposed to be the stone. All right, so they've all been regurgitated. Okay. But then the other titans attack them, and we have something called the Titanomachy. So there's, you know, we think some of us have families that have a lot of dissent and problems, but these people had a lot of problems. So we have the Titanomachy. All the Titans attack Zeus and his brothers and sisters, except for Themis and her son Prometheus. And Prometheus is going to be very important. So remember him. Okay. The Olympians win, and who helps them? They free the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, and they help them. And you can imagine in a battle, the Hecatoncheires, with their 50 arms, could be a big help. So they, in fact, help, and all of the Titans that have fought against Zeus and his brothers, sisters, are cast into Tartarus, except for Prometheus's mother and Prometheus, because they helped Zeus and his brothers and sisters. Atlas, who's one of the Titans, is given the job of holding up the heavens as punishment. It's a hard job because you have to do it 24/7, holding up the heavens. And what if your nose itches? What if you can't do anything about these things? This is a Greek vase from the uh, 6th century BC that shows poor Atlas, and you can see it's a hard job because he's got back pain, right, from holding up the heavens. All right, so they've fought the Titans. This must be it. This must be how Zeus comes to rule the universe. Not so fast, because Gia turns on him and produces a monster. She combines with Tartarus, that deep, dark place, to produce a monster called Typhoeus. This is the description of Typhoeus: muscular arms, fit for action, tireless feet of a god, 100 heads of a dragon, with flicking tongues, eyes with jets of flame. So, really, terrifying monster. Mouth had a voice uttering words only gods can know. The cry of a bull, the roar of a lion, the bark of a dog. Scary, scary creature. All right, but this is the best they could do in art. I mean, weren't you terrified? And then you see this. This is Zeus. So the Greek verbal description of these creatures is always way more terrifying than, at least to us, anything they put in the art. You see him, this is Zeus with his thunderbolt, and that's that monster. That's the best they could do to come up with that terrifying thing. Okay. All right. Zeus has triumphed, but will his rule continue? Remember last time that Zeus had a lot of affairs. There was a chart at the Hellenistic period, they counted maybe more than 300. So he has an affair with a spirit, a divinity named Metis, and she's pregnant because anytime any of the gods engage in sexual intercourse, a pregnancy results because they are part of what guarantees the fertility of the universe. So all right, so she's pregnant, and there's a prophecy that says, not this child, but the next child that she produces will be stronger than its father. Now, Zeus comes from a family where there are a lot of issues with fathers, right? And so he does not want to be involved with a son or child anyway that's stronger than he is. So, what to do? What should he do? It's not this child. She's pregnant with this child. It's not this child. But what should he do? Well, the logical answer, you might say, is he should just stay away from her, right? But that's not part of his, he doesn't do things. So he swallows Metis whole, pregnant Metis, of course. And one day he has a terrible headache. And his son Hephaestus comes and splits his head open, and out of his head pops Athena, fully armed. So no wonder he had such a bad headache. Fully armed, fully grown. And this always makes me laugh. This is the best the artist could do. This is a 6th century vase painting, and you see the very surprised Zeus as Athena is leaping out of his head, fully armed, and there's Hephaestus who's used his axe to split the head. Okay, so now Athena becomes one of the Olympian gods. Metis was a goddess of wisdom, and so Zeus, a spirit of wisdom, Zeus has incorporated wisdom into himself and then produced Athena. Okay, so. But then Gia gets mad again, and she has the giants against the gods, something that we call a gigantomachy. Heracles is involved. Don't ask me how he gets involved since we haven't created him, but this is what they do. This shows you the battle between the gods and the giants. You see those snaky things at the bottom? Those are giants' legs. Because remember, the giants came from Gaia. She is the earth. The Greeks associated snakes very much with the earth. Why? Well, if you ever look at snakes, they go underground, right? My dogs were chasing a snake once, and they were all excited, and then the snake just disappeared. My dogs weren't the brightest dogs. But anyway, they were very puzzled by this. Snakes also are connected with healing. They're connected with other things because they shed their skin. They're connected with the underworld because they go underground. So giants have snaky legs. The gods fight the giants and they defeat them. Okay, and you can see here in this is the same, this is a altar from the Hellenistic period, from Pergamon, which is in what is modern day Turkey. But if you look on the far right, you see the figure reaching up, the female figure with one arm reaching up. That's actually Gaia, because she's the earth, so she's not completely up from the ground, and she's reaching towards her son, who is in agony because Athena is pulling him by the hair, and she is trying to save him. So this was an epic battle We had the Titanomachy, the gods versus the Titans. Now we have the gods versus the giants. Zeus has to go through a lot to become ruler of the gods. And this is just it's German, I know, but it gives you the idea just to refresh your memories about everything for the gods anyway. There was chaos, then there are these other things that come out of that. Then we get the Titans, then we get Cronus and Rhea, then we get the children of Zeus. So this is the genealogy of the gods. And we have these themes. They're family plotting, which are folklore elements. Monsters get killed. That's usually considered a folklore element. And as you can see, the universe gets more and more and more complex. What did we start out with? A big, gaping hole. And suddenly we've got thousands of things going on. But you also notice that at first, Gia is really, really very important in everything, right? But she keeps losing power until finally we have Zeus is in charge of everything, right? We have the ascendancy of the male over the female. And the female is ambiguous, right? She's creative, she produces things, but she's destructive. She turns on Zeus, she turns on some of her children. So it's a interesting view. Many of these people can trace to what we call the Near East, the area of Persia, Assyria, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, those areas has influencing these Greek ideas. So we end up with this is what the world is. Olympus is on the top with the gods, the earth is in the middle, and underneath is Tartarus, the deepest, darkest place. Zeus and his brothers divide up the world. Zeus gets the heavens, but he's also in charge of everybody. Poseidon gets the sea, and Hades gets the least popular real estate, the underworld. This is where you go when you die. And as I mentioned last time, everyone who dies goes there. Doesn't matter how good you were or kind, doesn't matter how evil you were. Everybody gets to go there, and you're just a gray, misty shade that drifts around. So he's ruler of this not particularly pleasant place, but that's his kingdom. You say, but what about human beings? Where did we come from? And that's another story, right? Hesiod, who told us this whole long story about the void and the this and the this and the this, doesn't say anything about it. Zeus is often listed in some of our other sources as the creator of humans, Zeus and other gods. Some say, well, everything came out all at once, but the most popular version is that Prometheus created man. Prometheus, who, remember, is the son of a Titan, and he and his mother supported the gods. They didn't fight in the Titanomachy. And Prometheus really cares about humans. His name means forelearner, and he's often talked about as a trickster. You think about almost in some ways a very smart Bugs Bunny, right? Bugs Bunny was always outwitting that hunter. Prometheus is very smart and very sharp. He, however, has a brother, Epimetheus. And Epimetheus's name means hindsight, afterlearner. He's the, oh yeah, that's what I should have done, but I didn't do it. And Prometheus always knows exactly what should be done. Okay. Prometheus then made man, and I'm going to say man, and you're going to say, well, isn't she being, a little sexist, man? No, man. That's the made man. We'll see. Woman is another story. So, yeah. And there are going to be things that happen where you think, how could there be no women? This couldn't but just this is the story. So he made man from earth and water. Okay, so the earth is okay, Gia almost. So there's a divinity that's mixed in with this earth and water. And Ovid, the Roman writer, talks about how special man is, right? Man looks up. Man sees the stars. Everything else looks down. But man has the capacity to see the stars. So Prometheus creates this. And because he created it, he cares about it. He wants to see it succeed. He gives men all kinds of important things. He teaches them mathematics, although, at least in my case, that didn't always stick. But he teaches people mathematics, astronomy, harnessing, building, seafaring, all these things that you need that the Greeks considered to be civilized arts, writing, the calendar, medicine. You need prophecy, you need metallurgy. All these things come from Prometheus, who created man and then gives man all these good things. And Prometheus continues to help man, but also likes to trick Zeus and the powerful. And so uh, Prometheus pulls a trick on Zeus. He says to Zeus, humans sacrifice, they make offerings to you, and here are two bundles of offerings. Whichever one you pick, that'll be the one that humans will continue to give you. So you pick one, and that will be the one that humans give you, and the other one they will keep for themselves. Well, one bundle is beautiful, kind of glistening, looks like a nice roast with the fat on it, but actually inside is just bones. And the other package looks awful, but it has the good stuff, the good meat inside. So Zeus picks the one with the nice looking fat on it, which means forever after, the gods just get the bones and the smoke from sacrifices. And what do humans get? The meat. Okay, this is what we call an etiological myth. It's a myth that explains why it is that in historic ancient Greek times, when you made a sacrifice, the gods took the smoke and you got to have a barbecue. You got to eat the meat. Now, some versions of this say that Zeus was really not this stupid, that he knew what Prometheus was doing, but he just went along with him. Okay. But he gets angry about the whole situation anyway. And to punish humans for being a part of this, he takes fire from them. What does it mean he takes fire from them? Well, before this, men had had fire whenever they wanted it. It was in the trees from lightning. They didn't have to make fire. And it's, humans have had to make fire, right? And I don't know, I was a Girl Scout. I could never do anything rubbing two sticks together. I did have a student who participated in, she was a Native American, and she did know how to use a bow thing to make fire. But that's the only student I've ever had who knew how to make fire. Everyone else is like, you strike a match, you flick a lighter, so where does fire come from? But it had been freely available in the trees everywhere. Men could do whatever they wanted. They could have fire whenever they wanted. Well, Prometheus doesn't think this is right, that men should be without fire. And so he steals it back and gives it to them. Now, this isn't going to make Zeus happy, right? He's arranged this punishment, and Prometheus is going against it. And so Zeus imprisons Prometheus. He chains him in the Black Sea area, and then every day an eagle, which is the bird of Zeus, comes and rips Prometheus's liver out. Now remember, divine figures are immortal. They do not die, they do not age, but they do feel pain. So every day he's in agony with his liver being ripped out. It grows back in time to be ripped out again. So this is a perpetual punishment that Prometheus suffers because he cared for mankind enough to give fire back. And this is a cup, you saw this scene before, it sort of shows suffering titans, right? Because on the one side is poor Atlas holding up the heavens, and on the other side, there's chained Prometheus. The eagle is approximately in the area of his liver, ripping his liver out, and you can see the blood gushing out, just in case. So, yeah, painful. Now, this would have gone on forever, except that Prometheus has a secret. He has a secret that Zeus desperately wants to know the answer to. And it's a secret that it's going to sound like you've heard it before, but here's the secret. There's another female that if Zeus has a child with her, the child will be greater than Zeus. I know, another one. But Prometheus knows who it is, and Zeus doesn't. And you might say, well, maybe he could lay off things for a little while. Maybe he could just hang with his wife, but it might be her, right? It might be Hera. He doesn't know. And he doesn't want to be deposed. He's seen his family history, right? He doesn't want what happened to Uranus to happen to him. He doesn't want to be deposed like Cronus was. He wants to be in charge. So he needs to know who this woman is, this female. So eventually he relents and he says, okay, Prometheus, tell me who it is and I'll let you go. And so, in fact, Heracles goes and frees Prometheus from this torture. Okay. The woman, the female, is Thetis. Thetis is a, uh, she's one of the Nereids. She's one of the sea divinities. And so Zeus says, okay, if Thetis is going to produce a child more powerful than its father, let's just marry her off to a mortal because it doesn't matter. The kid can be more powerful than its father, but its father's immortal, so it can't hurt me. So who are we going to find? And they find a guy named Peleus, which is a whole other story, but Peleus' son is going to be Achilles, who is in fact more powerful than his father. He's a great hero, but he's nobody who can challenge Zeus. But this wedding, which we'll talk about in another episode of this course, this wedding is the site of events that are going to actually lead to the Trojan War. But they do get these two married. So Zeus is now happy. Prometheus can keep his liver. But now, wait a minute. There were two parties in this whole fire stealing thing, right? Prometheus stole the fire, but who took it? Men took the fire. Men could have said, oh no, Zeus doesn't want us to have fire. We don't want it. Thank you, Prometheus. No, they took it. So there needs to be something done to them as well. There needs to be a punishment for mankind for accepting the fire. And so, what is the most horrible thing that can be created and done to men? Hesiod says, may they all be merry at heart, forever embracing this horror. Is it a 100-headed monster? Is it a tidal wave? Is it a giant snake? Is it a dragon? What could be so horrible? Woman. Yes, apparently, although Zeus was sleeping with a lot of divine figures, apparently man was very happy being womanless. Okay? Man was living the life. Fire everywhere, no women, right? Sacrifices full of meat. But now it's time to pay the piper, and the monster is going to be unleashed on them. All right, so what's it going to be? Well, it has to have a shape, has to have a form. So it's going to be beautiful, like a goddess. Okay? It's going to have some skills. You don't want to give them, it's not going to be useless. It can weave, which is in fact what women spend all their time doing in the ancient world. You're responsible for making the fabric for the household. There's an awful lot of weaving that goes on for ancient women. But then she brings with her desire and heartbreak and the aching sorrow of love, and of course, thievish morals and the soul of a female dog. Okay? Okay, so here is this monster. Now, they create this monster, okay, and they call her Pandora. And we don't know if the name means, Hesiod says because all the gods gave her gifts, but then she could be all giving, as we'll see a little bit later. So her name means the Pan part, and Dora, those are gifts. So Pandora. So Hermes added some extra lies and swindles in there. Hermes is the god of, remember, he's the god of thieves, he's the god of gamblers. He's also the god of businessmen. I'm not saying anything, but thieves, gamblers, businessmen, liars, cheats. So he gives her some gifts. All the gods give her something. But there she is. She will forever be a curse to men, right? This horrible, horrible thing. Hesiod was a very gloomy guy. But who will take her? Who in their right mind would accept this gift? Oh, not to worry. Prometheus' brother, Epimetheus, after thinker, he will take her. And this is a Greek vase that shows, I think it's kind of cute. You have Zeus standing there. You have Hermes who has brought her. Epimetheus is standing there looking down at this thing. And it looks great, doesn't it? It's got its arms raised. It's looking up at him. It's beautiful. And Cupid's kind of hanging out there suggesting love. And he's looking at this thinking, this is my lucky day. Look, look what I got. Wow, I'm gonna take it. Yes, yes, I am so happy. Okay, so, but she's not by herself. She brings a jar. Now, you have probably heard the story of Pandora, and it's described as a box, but that's just a mistranslation. It was a jar. And in her jar, I mean, she's bad enough, right? She's lying, thieving, yeah. But in her jar are all the other bad things that plague people, disease and war, every bad thing you can think of comes spewing out of her jar. So she's, in that sense, she's all giving too. She gives all the evils to the world. She's incorporated in herself evil, but she gives all evils back to the world. And Hesiod says only one thing stays in her jar, hope. And so this has been much debated, right? Hope is in the jar with the evils. So does that mean that hope is a bad thing? I say to my students, hope can be a bad thing, right? I didn't study for the test, but I'm hoping to do well. That's probably a bad thing, right? But yet it doesn't come out into the world. So does that mean there is no hope in the world at all? It's an interesting conundrum about hope, but it remains in the jar. We'll talk a little bit about jars. Women were very much associated in the ancient Greek world with containers, with jars. This is actually a water jar, and it shows women going to the fountain house carrying water jars to get water. So that's something that women did. But women were thought of as containers, and pregnancy was the result of the man depositing everything that was needed in the container of the woman, which only had basically the dirt that helped the child grow. That everything else that was the child was from the man. And the woman was just a vessel to hold. And I mean, again, we now know that there's a contribution from both male and female. But on the other hand, you can see one contribution with the naked eye. You cannot see the egg with the naked eye. So they had no way of knowing about that. So they figured, it gets larger, it's a container, and men are important, and so they must be the ones that are doing the whole thing. And so the idea of her carrying a jar is also associated with the idea of women as containers. Now, Hesiod wrote in the 8th century, and he's again the one who gives us this rather, this story of the evil horror of women. And you might think, well, he's just a gloomy person. And in fact, he was an unhappy person. His brother had stolen some land from him, and he thought of all of life as being going from a golden age down to his current age, which he called really the age of iron and the age of despair. Right? That humans had had a wonderful time, golden age, then there was silver, there was an age of heroes, there was a bronze age, and now it's iron age and everything is sad. So you might think that his attitude is something to do with his own kind of depressiveness. However, we can go to Simonides of Argos in the 7th century BC, and he wrote a poem about the 10 types of woman, which I will now illustrate. We have the pig woman. The pig woman is dirty. You have the fox woman. She is evil and moody. The dog woman. She talks a lot. The dirt woman. No skills, no sense of right and wrong. She's a glutton and she's selfish. The water woman. She can be calm or she can be a storm at sea. She's two-faced. So not really getting a positive view of women. Pandora wasn't a good thing, and Simonides doesn't think women are a good thing. And you think, well, what is the root of all this? Remember, Aegea was treacherous in the end, the earth. What is the root of all this? And we don't necessarily know, but one of the things relies in their own social practices, one of which was, and remember this literature, the poetry, all of this, it's not written for everybody. It's written by aristocratic men for aristocratic people. So it reflects their viewpoint. And an aristocratic man would be 30 years old when he married his wife, and she would be 12, 13, 14. And the goal of the marriage was to produce legitimate children. So you wanted to marry her young because you wanted to make sure that you were the father of your own children, right? You were the first person and the only person to have access to her. So if you can imagine a 30-year-old man and a 14-year-old girl whose main life is to learn how to keep house and weave, are not going to have a whole lot in common, so that talking to, so this idea that women are just not worth spending a lot of time with may have some origin in there. But back to our 10 types of women. You're hoping, right? There's going to be something. You got the donkey woman. She's stubborn, she's promiscuous, and she's a glut. The weasel woman. She's sex crazed. Okay. The horse woman. Lazy, vain. She's more interested in, taking care of her mane and her tail than anything else. The ape woman. She's ugly, shameless, and tricky. The catalog of just wonderfulness, isn't it? Yeah, I know. Ah, the good woman. Woman number 10. The bee. She runs a thriving household. She's loving, she's graceful, she's chaste, and she bears those legitimate children. So, but Hesiod and Simonides would basically agree, even though they did not live in the same period. It's hard to get that bee woman, right? You got a 1 in 10 chance of getting the bee woman. Because woman is just not, yeah. So that's what they thought about creation. It's a interesting idea of how things came. One thing that, even though this Simonides is later and he's characterizing women, but one thing you notice in Greek creation stories is that there's really no interest in where anything else came from. There's no where did the dogs come from, or the sheep, or the pigs, or the trees, or the, no, it's pretty much the earth, the sky, the mountains, the ocean, men, women. That's it. There's no stories about any other creation of anything else. So, and if we look at Greek art, or if we look at a lot of things in the Greek world, that there is this real emphasis on humans. Humans are the most important thing. And so you don't need to spend time with where all of these other things came from. the most important thing, the humans, and how did Zeus come to be in charge of all the humans. So it's a little bit of a strange story, but it's you know, it explained everything, right? Now you know how Zeus came to rule the universe. You know where woman came from. You know where man came from, and you can see that in the Greek version, woman is a completely different species, right? Not made from in the biblical creation story of Adam and Eve. There's a part that's taken in this totally separate creation because, as we've seen, these are creatures that are strange. And I'll go back to the Sphinx. Remember the Egyptian Sphinx? And it's a lion with the head of Pharaoh. And the Greeks see that, and maybe they don't really understand what it is. They think of it as a monster. And they come back home to Greece, or they see Egyptian images in Greece, and they think, it's a monster. And what could be the most monstrous thing? So the Egyptian Sphinx is Pharaoh, the male. The Greek Sphinx is female, because because what else would be so scary? Yeah. So she's a winged female lion who terrorizes, if you know the story of Oedipus with her riddle. So again, what is the most scary, most monstrous thing? Apparently, woman is a scary thing. Okay, so that's creation. Does anyone have any questions? Mm-hmm.
Who told these stories? Who told? Well, they weren't stories then, but it was the belief system. So who perpetuated that?
Well, this is a very oral culture, so these
Yeah.
stories would have been told, these poems would have been recited at parties, at banquets. The art would have shown some of these images, so everybody would have, it's kind of generally around. There's no sacred text in the ancient Greek world. There's no book that everybody consulted. There's a series of rituals, there's stories, and these myths were more history to them than any kind of entertainment thing. This is why our city is here, because this hero founded it, and our rulers have always been descended from this hero. So this is history. So people would tell these stories, and this is the rock where such and such happened. Yeah. Excuse me. People were telling stories orally. Hesiod was one of the early ones that we have writing for. The thing is, we don't get Greek writing, Greek literature until the 8th century BCE, but we assume that people were telling these stories. For example, the Iliad and the Odyssey, they were recited long before they were written down. So he wrote this, and this would have been disseminated amongst, intellectuals and upper class people and recited at banquets. But the ideas were ideas that everybody kind of believed in. It's not that he told them that this is what happened. He didn't create them. He just collated them in a sense. Yeah, these are ideas that they believed, and he wrote a poem about them.
When did the Oracle at Delphi come into play?
Well, the Oracle of Delphi was active going back, probably into 8th century, the 10th century, maybe that far back, BC. It was active during the 5th century, during the Persian Wars. Greek cities would go ask what to do. They would like, should we do this? Should we do that? And the oracle gave advice. So it was a continuous feature of Greek life for centuries.
Okay, we have a question or a comment here. Were the characteristics of women also shared by the female gods? And can you comment on the idea that hope remained in Pandora's jar?
The goddesses, they're not in the hierarchy of things. Remember, who rules the world? Zeus has the sky, Poseidon has the sea, Hades has the underworld. So the goddesses don't have the geography that the gods have. they're not looked upon as derogatorily in the way that we saw that women were, because they have power. Athena is the goddess of Athens. She has power. So I guess in that sense, they're not looked down upon. But on the other hand, they are still female. So it's a, you know, and then hope in the jar. Yeah, that's a tough one. Why is, and people have come up with, well, it stays in the jar because there's no hope in the world. Okay. But then why is it an evil in the first place? Remember, everything in the jar was bad. So why is hope bad? Is hope bad because it deludes us, right? We hope for something and then it doesn't happen, or there's false hopes, right? So it's kind of a philosophical debate. People are not sure why it was in the jar in the first place, and then why it doesn't come out.
Any more questions?
We have another one. Rick Gold, go ahead.
Thanks very much. Could you tell us about how the Greek and Near Eastern myths interacted to become sort of a common body, or in certain ways? Was it because of political control or trade, or other ways?
It was probably trade. There's a lot of trade going on. And so remember, I'm talking about these stories as being recited. These Near Eastern stories were recited too. So there may have been some interaction. There were certainly Greeks who went to places like Egypt. There was a Greek trading colony in Egypt, so they could see these things. But not necessarily that they were immersed in the Near East, but that they picked up some things, like pieces of stories that they interpreted in their own way. So, but that some of these stories are older and are in the Near East. There's stories about Near Eastern gods that do things that are somewhat similar to what the Greek gods and goddesses do. So we can't say a direct transmission, but maybe a process of seeing things and hearing things, and maybe a little bit of intermarriage with some of these people and some of these ideas come around, but no sitting down and formally learning somebody else's religion and then that kind of study. No.
Okay, is that it for questions? Well, Marianne, thank you very much for an interesting talk indeed. I have one really quick question, and that is, I'm wondering if there really is any evidence that originally Greek religion was matriarchal, and that is that there was an ascended female deity, Gaia, I'm thinking of, or whomever, and it got subverted and sort of overreacted in the other direction, and that is it becomes very male dominated.
Well, there is a theory, and certainly when people look at Minoan Crete in the Bronze Age, they see all of these images of women who seem to be in important roles as priestesses. But it's very hard to make judgments about what people were thinking when you're only looking at their art. And one example I give the students is I once saw a painting where there was a huge image of the Virgin Mary. It was like 3 stories tall in a room. Meeting in the room was a council of Catholic bishops. So if you take the bishops out of the room and you're an archaeologist and you see the huge image of the woman, you would say that this was a matriarchal society and that the woman was in charge. You bring the bishops back in to have their meeting, and women are not bishops. So it's really hard to figure out from the art. But certainly the Minoans are a group that people tend to cite and say, well, maybe there was an original matriarchal society. And we saw that Gia was pretty powerful in the beginning, and then things fall apart. But we don't have any concrete evidence that we can necessarily say. There are some things, for example, at Olympia, the temple of Hera is before the temple of Zeus. So there's a little bit of evidence, but certainly by the time we get to the historic times, if that was there, it's gone. And your idea of overreaction, swinging the pendulum back really hard, that's interesting. I don't know. I hadn't thought of
Thank you very much.